boss told me if you don't like it, then leave. When I was younger I worked as an engineer for a small company. The owner, who I'll call Jake, let me know before I started that I would be doing about 10-hour days, 6 days a week for about 6 months, but that I would have to be flexible. Some days they wouldn't have work for me and other days I'd be expected to stay a few hours late. This didn't bother me too much as I wasn't too tight for money and I didn't mind staying behind a few extra hours occasionally. I got to work and was told to follow instructions from the owner's brother, Steve. He was an arrogant character, who always thought he knew how to do everyone else's job better than them. We butted heads a few times but nothing major. A few months in, I found a new job starting in a week that paid better. Later on that day I had another disagreement with Steve. The situation was petty but it's his response that really confused me. It ended with him screaming in my face, "If you don't do as I say, then you can fucking leave." So I packed my stuff and left. Steve was a little confused, thinking I'd just fall in line. He was too arrogant to apologize, and I had a job lined up. Side note for people not in the UK, I was working a 0-hour contract. This means I get an hourly wage but I'm not afforded some labor rights like a set salary, minimum work hours or notice for dismissal. This works both ways though, so I can leave the job whenever I want with no notice. I decided to call up Jake since he'd always been chill and told him what happened. He told me he needed me and I should just return to work.
I told him unless he controls Steve and made him apologize, there was no way I was coming back. He refused, so I told him I'll send in my final timesheet. 2 weeks later and I've started my new job. I still haven't been paid for my final week, so I called Jake. He told me that since you didn't give notice for leaving, you owe me for lost product of work. He said if I didn't like it, I should sue him and recommended I should just take the loss and move on. This was complete BS. A couple months go by until I finally find time to file for small claims court. Few days after sending him notice, Jake paid my money including court fees and extra. He actually called me up apologizing for the confusion. He wanted to know when I could return to work.
I'd heard from one of my ex-coworkers that because of the infrequent hours, people would leave as soon as they were told they wouldn't have work the next day. Others would leave when they realized how much of a jerk Steve was. They'd gone through about 7 different workers in the time I was gone and struggled to keep anyone for more than a week. I told him I'd think about it. I managed to string him along for a few weeks before he stopped calling me. The moral of the story is that if you think you're being treated unfairly, you shouldn't just put up with it. Your self-respect isn't worth compromising. Don't settle for being treated like shit, especially when you're willing to go above and beyond for them.
The ultimate power of the worker is to not work. Your employer needs someone to do your job, and if they're taking the piss you don't have to stay. Well done up.
If you think you're being treated unfairly, you shouldn't just put up with it. Your self-respect isn't worth compromising. I have stayed at places for less money because I was treated well by the people and especially management. I have walked out of places because of bad management and unfair treatment. I was a hard enough worker at the places I liked that I know I would have no problems with my resume. If a company doesn't handle its managers well and make sure they are running things fairly and treating the employees properly, then the company will have a high turnover rate.
I went through a fast food line and chatted up the employee about work. They said, "Oh, if you applied here and said you quit your last job for anything to do with management you wouldn't get hired." I said, "That's quite the red flag. Thanks for letting me know that this place is proud to hire bad management and doesn't listen to its employees either."
A company gives you money in return for your work. It is not a favor. They are not being nice to you and letting you work there. It's an exchange of services, and the sooner some bosses realize that, the better. Don't settle for being treated like shit, especially when you're willing to go above and beyond for them. This is so very true. I quit a job after I got passed over for a promotion. Let me explain here. That was pretty much the last straw for me. A lot of bullshit happened before this that I'm not gonna get into. I asked why I didn't get the promotion. I was told the person that got it had fewer attendance points and knew more jobs. After some investigation, I found out that we had the same amount of attendance points. He knew 4 jobs and I knew 12. That was the breaking point for me. I realized I was nothing to them and I'm not exactly sure why. It could have been the fact I was an older fat woman that had FMLA for a chronic pain condition.
All I know is that I'm so much happier being out of that place.
Ew. It reminds me how my ex-boss said, "You can go if you don't like it here. People are queuing behind the door to get your place." So I left. They called me twice and begged me to come back. I just laughed. There are always other jobs out there. No need to say it, but #fuck Steve. Funny how, "I don't owe you" changed to "confusion" when he needed you back. I work for a family-run company. Father and 3 sons. I like it a lot, but one son has the "everyone here owes me for letting them keep their job" attitude. He's not in charge of my department. But of course his type is in charge of every department. I'm just waiting for him to pull this shit with me. I'd get called back the same day by one of the cool bosses. I wouldn't even demand a raise or anything. Just tell Derek to put his power boner away so we can work. The last time an employer said that to me, I was pulling out of the parking lot less than 5 minutes later. I have been self-employed ever since. 0-hour contracts are the fucking worst. I've done my time working them and I just bulldozed myself into the ground just trying to earn enough every month to survive. Never again. They need to be overruled. People don't quit from jobs, they quit from supervisors. Should have told Jake, "I'll come back on one condition. I get Steve's current job, including all his perks, pay rate, and contracted hours. He gets fired." Why don't you just leave? Quote, "Leaves. Oh yeah? Well, you're not getting your last paycheck. Sue me." Quote, "Sues." Took a similar approach once upon a time. Reorg. Management change. Got a bad review for spending too much of my time on what I saw as the most important part of my job. Spent a good while very conflicted about my job role and priorities. At one meeting, my skip level manager told me, "That's good to do, but your job is X. That project is useful to inform your real work." It was like a light bulb went off. What I care about doing isn't my job. That's fixable. So off I went and found a different position that wanted me to do the work I cared about full time. With a very nice pay increase to boot. My manager was not happy with his manager when I told him how my decision to leave had crystallized. I worked a 35-hour shift and then found out my BKSS was keeping tips and overcharging me for coke. 0-hour contract for any kind of engineer-level position? Should have been an Insta-pass. Can you explain the UK labour laws a bit further? I'm very curious to learn more. You seem indicate that a normal set salary position doesn't allow an employee to leave with no notice. What happens if an employee with that set salary just up and quits? No shows permanently, etc.? Fuck employers who don't respect their workers. Years ago I had a boss who told me that and was stunned when I said okay and walked out.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.